Agile.FM, radio for the Agile community. www.agile.fm. Welcome to the Agile.FM podcast, and today I'm here with a New York native, with Heather Fleming from the Guild Group. The Guild Group, G-I-L-T. What is that Guild Group? And first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. So Guild Group is an e-commerce technology company, and we specialize in luxury merchandise and offering that luxury merchandise to our customers at a discount. Mm-hmm. So, the flash sales model, how do we scale in the flash space? We're the leading flash sale company. Mm-hmm. We are constantly looking for ways to keep this model growing and alive, and always offer value to our customers.
Okay, what is flash sales?
So for a period of time, a set period of time, typically maybe 36 hours, we will offer a sale, whether it's a specific brand or a collection of merchandise, and just for that period of time, that merchandise is on sale at a discount. Mm-hmm. So our sales typically start at 12 noon every day. This is Eastern time, and we see this huge rush and spike in traffic and conversion at that time because everybody's coming to Guild to see what do they have today, what's on sale, and there's kind of a little bit of a battle over the best merchandise, which feeds this shopping frenzy that, typically before the flash sale model was in existence, people would do this at sample sales throughout the city. So they'd wait on these tremendously long lines to get into this special sale to secure luxury goods at a discount. Mm-hmm. So we've brought that to the world online.
Okay. So this is e-commerce. This is obviously a day-to-day business. I would assume it's very dynamic. From a business models perspective, also, as you mentioned, from a traffic's perspective, we can imagine this is a key initiative, and you are part of that program management team, and you have decided to go agile with this a while ago. What were the motivators? What were the drivers for going agile?
So I started with Guild in August of 2010, and my job was really to come in and form the PMO, which is the program management organization. And typically, people start to feel a little bit nervous about a PMO being established because, as an engineer at a startup company, you're used to very flexible ways of working, and all of a sudden a PMO comes in, and the first thing they want to do is implement a lot of processes and procedures, and they consider it red tape, right? All these people are going to get in my way of getting things done. So my specialty, however, is in finding unique ways of working that really grease the wheels and add tremendous value to an engineering culture. I don't really believe in traditional waterfall style methodologies. My philosophy and way of working is naturally agile. So coming in here, people are even afraid of agile though. There is a hesitancy towards any kind of formalized process. And as I'm sure you know, agile has a set of rules or guidelines or principles under which we work, and it is a challenge to get people to adopt them and understand them, and also mold them to what they want to accomplish in a better way of working. So coming into Guild, I have a lot of experience under my belt working in this way, and it was a challenge to kind of get everybody rallied behind, okay, let's try to find a common way to work and a common way to speak about work. And it took a few iterations of trying out different methodologies with the teams, we called it Swagathon. Essentially what we ended up doing was having a pool of resources that we pulled from to work on specific projects, and people could request work from this pool through a meeting called a Swagathon. Right. So But of course, what happens is you end up with a backlog that's longer than you're able to complete work.
Well.
So it was just unsatisfying, right? There was just a never-ending backlog of important work, and it was difficult to get things done across the entire organization. So we moved from that to more of an initiative-based model.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is really the key to get people rallied behind a common vision, and also to understand how that vision ties into the larger strategy for the company as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to walk through how that works, if you like.
I would love to. And maybe before you do that, maybe you can just give the listeners just a little bit of a feeling of size of the organization as well. When we're talking about initiatives, how big are the teams? How many teams are there? Just to get a feeling of size of the Guild Group.
Sure. So I work in the technology department at Guild. And in technology, there are approximately 100, 130 engineers. And it's based out of New York City as well as Dublin, Ireland. So we have a nice group of folks out there as well. And we work on any number of initiatives from customer-facing product initiatives to back-office operational initiatives. Mm-hmm. So the PMO, which is the group that I head up, is a centralized organization that gets to see what's happening across the entire span of technology. And we work a lot with all the different stakeholders and partners in the department, in the different areas of Guild, to provide visibility and communication, and also a lot of deep partnership to move the needle on our KPIs for each initiative team. Mm-hmm. So Guild as a whole is about 1,000 people. Wow. So it's a relatively, it's a large organization considering how young it is. Mm-hmm. And, we have people in New York City, we have people in Kentucky, mm-hmm. We have a number of remote folks, and Ireland and Limerick as well.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit the red tape before.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you also, you're very open about mentioning that you are an advocate of something called just enough process.
Yes.
How do they go in sync? Not having the red tape, obviously, but what is just enough process? You explored a few processes you just mentioned, but how did you end up in the place where you are today?
So when I started out in project management, the first thing I did was I went and I got my PMP certification, which is very traditional style, very paperwork heavy, but it's what I believed was the right way of working. And part of this is my personality is very much like I'm a list maker. I love the security that the paperwork gives you. I love the sign-offs. You have something to point back to. And so for a while, that was my world in project management, was working in this very heavy pre-planning, everything documented style. And I ended up really shifting in the past, I would say 8 years of my career to a more agile style of working, because I realized just how much time I was wasting and how much paperwork I was rewriting, and it just was not efficient. And I'm an action-oriented person.
Okay.
I don't want to hide behind my paperwork. I don't want to use it as a crutch. I'm really engaged with people that I work with, and I want to make sure that we are doing things, not just writing about them or planning them, that we're doing. So, I started to do a lot more research into agile methodologies and Scrum specifically. I luckily worked at a place, I was working for EXO Group, which is most well known for the Not.com. And I was luckily working for a company that allowed me a lot of flexibility in experimenting in methodology. So we tried to roll out Scrum across a number of teams to see how that would work. And through doing that, and also at that time, I had read the book Rework, the 37 Signals book. And it was kind of a major turning point for me, just personally and professionally, like to realize that there is a better way of working, specifically with software development, and having the freedom to experiment with teams and having those teams be really responsive to these new techniques, and learning what works for them and what doesn't work, and what do they react positively to and what do they not like. It was kind of a development for me to break out of this old style of working and then really start to think about what is the future of project management? How do we make this discipline something that engineering teams are asking for a PM instead of being like, oh no, I'm going to get a project manager on this team. Like that means like I'm going to have to sit in meetings and write out, documentation and everything else. So it was really the spark for me to make project management something new. And there isn't even a traditional PM role in Agile, right? For Scrum, you can compare it to the Scrum Master, or you can compare it to the product owner. Right. But we were project managers. Like, where do we fit?
Where do we fit?
So sometimes we take on a Scrum Master role. Sometimes we take on the product owner role. But it was important to me to not box us in by any traditional definition, but to really talk about what's working and talk about what's not working and change things and adjust and adapt and be agile about our agile methodologies. Yeah. So having done all of that, and then being able to do that at Gilt has been an incredible experience. And the teams today, we are not operating under one specific agile methodology. It's more a philosophy, a way of being. And then we are trying to figure out for each team, based on who's on that team, what are the personalities in that team? What are they going to respond to or not respond to? I started to get deep into the psychology of it.
Yeah, I was just going there. I see you have a psychological aspect here of software engineering, how you assemble the teams. Yes. You also have I think it just goes by the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, what is it, type indicator?
Yes.
Yes. So that there's certain types you categorize and you're certified in this.
Yes, I became MBTI certified while at Gilt, mainly because I started to see deep connections between types of preferences and how those preferences work together, even how being aware of preferences, that awareness really helps guide how a team works better together.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because people hear MBTI and they also have a negative reaction to it, very similar to they hear PMO or PM or project management and they have a negative reaction to it. So I'm finding like my specialty is taking these things that people normally have a negative reaction to and broadening what that means and changing the definition of what that means and how it actually contributes to an agile way of being and thinking.
Yeah. Should we go specific here? What is a good type indicator for let's say a Scrum Master? What is it?
You know what I would say? It doesn't matter what the 4-letter type is for a person because it depends on that individual's expression of that type, right? Okay. So you can generalize and say that the majority of software engineers may have an introverted preference, right? They're not likely to speak up. They like to put their headphones on and code. They like to really be insulated, right, from outside distraction. It's their preference, but some of them may be great presenters and be very comfortable leading a room, which is an extroverted preference. So it really depends on the individual's expression of type. But I think what has been very helpful is leading teams through what does the 4-letter type mean? Where do you fall in that preference? Because it is really a black or white. You're either this or that. You're right-handed or left-handed. Right. But what does that mean, and how does that play out within the dynamics of the rest of the team? And then how do you use those preferences to your advantage, and also where do you need to flex into the other preference in order to make the team more successful? So I've used it in both an individual coaching practice as well as team building. And as new initiative teams form, we talk about, okay, well, what is the type of the team versus what is the type of guilt? Because you can kind of apply that same preference type to a team or a company, and then figure out what does that mean for you, and where do you need to flex and grow?
Yeah.
But it is a willingness to explore that. It is a willingness to grow and change. And I think that ties perfectly into how successful our teams with Agile is. How are you? Are you an Agile person? Are you willing to kind of explore and do retrospectives on yourself and constantly iterate on yourself and grow and flex and figure out what can you change and what can you make better? And then how does that apply to the workings of the team?
So often we see agile teams to be cross-functional, going into various kind of corners of technology, QA, and so forth. Do you also apply that on those type indicators? Is that something like, well, this team has 5 extroverted people right now, and we need to balance that out with 2 introverted? Is that a good mix?
I mean, again, because it isn't about isn't about trying to find people of certain types to balance out. Yeah. It's more of an awareness of how you contribute, or how do you express your unique type. Okay. I would, you would never use this as a way to place people in teams, but it is a good, once the team is together, we talk about it and we become aware of how you express your type and how does that play out. For me personally, I'll tell you my type because I'm very open about it. I am an INFJ. So what that means is I prefer introversion. Which surprises a lot of people because I do like to talk about things I'm quite passionate about. I could come across as an extroverted person, but I prefer introversion. The N is for intuition, so I'm a gut instinct type of person. The F is feeling, so I'm very empathetic and I could put myself into other people's shoes and understand their point of view and where they're coming from. And the J is kind of describes how I started out in project management, very task oriented, very disciplined, very list maker. And I feel that to be agile, I've really shifted that J preference from a judging preference into a perceiving preference, which is more about keeping options open, more about exploring what's possible and still getting things done, still driving towards goals and targets, but in a very more open, relaxed way than the list maker, the documentation person. It has been a shift, and I've seen that shift play out in my own MBTI.
Yeah, maybe we can see with those 4 types, and let's not call it buckets or categories or anything, but only with these 4 types, you see how many possibilities there are actually in terms of how many matches or not. Just before this podcast, I was just going through the types very quickly myself. And actually looked at it and says, what would I be? And we have 1 overlap. That's so based on our numbers. I'm not telling you which one, but we out of those 4 types, we got 1 match.
But I think my point is really that it doesn't mean I'm going to be more successful at what I do than somebody else of a different type.
Right.
It just means I am very aware of how my preferences play out in my career and my work, and that awareness helps me flex into the other preferences, like when I need to. It was very freeing for me to go through that process of understanding type preference, and also in working with individuals and teams, it's been extremely valuable to just get people talking about who they are and how they like to work. I think sometimes the Agile Scrum methodology can be difficult for people who prefer introversion, because there is this let's go around the table and now it's your turn to speak about what are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow? What are your blockers? There's a lot of meetings, right? There's a lot of in-person collaboration.
You have to be vocal.
So how do you find a way that maybe your most introverted person on the team can successfully participate in an agile methodology, but in their own authentic way, something that doesn't push them into a place where they're uncomfortable? So we explore a lot of different techniques that that work for individualized teams based on what's going to work best for them and what's going to make the people on that team feel good about the process.
Yeah. So Heather, I have a question though about your 4 types.
Okay.
You have a degree with a major in theater.
Yes, I do.
And you describe yourself as an introvert.
Yes.
How does that work together? How could you prefer introvert and over extrovert?
Well, the real key to understanding introversion and extroversion is energy. Where do you get your energy from? In extroverted preference, people that prefer extroversion generally get their energy from interacting and socializing with a lot of people. They enjoy the face-to-face communication. They feel energized after that kind of thing. For me, it's draining on me. Like I don't necessarily, I can do it, meaning I, can go to parties and mingle and talk to a lot of people, but it is physically draining for me. I lose energy when I do that. Where I get my energy from is from internal introspection, right? Thinking about things on my own. I like to think about things and then I like to act on them, as opposed to extroversion, which is act and then think. So, yes, I have a theater degree and I have performed in a lot of plays, but there is something about character development that's very internal.
Yeah.
Even though you are performing, there is a piece of that happens inside.
Right, of course. Right. Do you think that helped you at all? That degree and something like really outside of PMO and software engineering work? Do you see any kind of things where you look back, you look at teams, you pull in certain knowledge and experience from your theater work?
Well, I think it has definitely helped in the empathy piece of what I do, right? Okay. Being able to put yourself in another person's shoes and understand their point of view, where they're coming from, that helps tremendously, whether you're trying to understand a request from a business partner or why an engineer is frustrated. It really helps to understand what are they going through and what are they experiencing. And the theater world in general is also very date driven, right? So the show has to happen on a certain date. So that discipline of making sure that all of the pieces connect and all of the things get done so that you can have the show is a very, very similar thing to what we do in project management.
All right. So here's just so for now, if we summarize halfway here, we have the Guild Group, a group of 1,000 people have adopted Agile. You are spearheading the PMO efforts. You are all about just enough process. What's interesting is you are in the luxury consumer goods industry, but you don't have a luxury process.
What do you mean by a luxury process?
You have a just enough process, right? So bare bone.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting approach. You guys have used Scrum. You guys have used various kinds of processes. But let's go business. Let's go over to the business side. How has business changed and replied to your Agile work? I mean, you have been doing this now for 3 years, I think.
3.5 years here.
3.5 years. So what's the feedback you're getting?
You know what? It has not been easy. I think that a lot of folks come from more traditional style project management ways of working. They're expecting full project plans, right? They're expecting everything to be date driven. I think that's just how people are used to working. So there's a lot of work to be done in socializing Agile throughout the organization and getting people to buy in and understand why it works and why it's valuable and why it's going to push us further and allow us to innovate in areas that we normally wouldn't. So we've done a lot of speaking around this topic, both internally and externally, and we've dubbed it the social experiment.
Yeah.
Because it is an experiment. It is, we're trying to see if it will be successful. And essentially what it is we understand that strategy corporate strategy starts, at the top. C-level execs figure out what they want to invest in for the coming 12 months, right? It's high level, it's strategic, it is maybe like a one sentence area of focus. And then from strategy, we start to break that down into what initiatives would we need to execute on in order to support that corporate strategy. So it kind of gets broken down a little bit further. And from there, we start doing some preliminary models around, okay, what would be successful financially? Or maybe it's not about the finances, but it's a more strategic move. We decide what initiatives we're going to work on. And then what we do is start talking about who we need, right? The people to support those initiatives. And it is a combination of technologists and business partners. Like, how are we all going to support this initiative? What are the KPIs? So we go through a rigorous process of figuring out what's important and defining those KPIs. And when we're building the teams, we think about them not in terms of roles. It's not like I need an engineer, I need a UX person, I need a product manager, a project manager, a QA person. We talk about people in terms of the qualities, or we call them ingredients, the ingredients that they bring to the team. So we have a list of ingredients and qualities that we go through to determine the right makeup of each team. So we go and it allows us a way to kind of connect, okay, this initiative and this team to the corporate strategy. And then those teams form, and they take those KPIs and they start discussing them with their business partners, and together coming up with, okay, what does our backlog look like? What are the things that we should be doing to move the needle? So that's really where the Agile methodology kicks in. And it is very different than a roadmap driven methodology, which some teams still operate under. Because there is we're still growing, and we're still shifting, and we're still working with all of the people at Gilt in how we can be more agile as a company. And like I said earlier, a lot of people believe the right way is the roadmap process, where you plan out an entire year, including capacity planning and project plans and dates. But we're trying to get people to understand that we're in such a state of growth and change. The minute you put that roadmap together, some new idea is going to come up, or somebody's going to change their mind, or somebody wants to shift direction, and then you have to start over. And there's so much wasted in the planning and replanning process that we want to get everybody to adopt this KPI-driven methodology and this more agile way of working, because we believe it brings deeper partnerships. It is this everybody's working together towards these measurable common goals, as opposed to, okay, we have to get this project done on this date, otherwise it's going to be a disaster. It's just a different way of thinking, and it has been hard to shift to that way of thinking, and we're constantly working on that. So it is like an ongoing mission.
So, but some of those strategies and those visions you guys had 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, are implemented at this point using Agile. Is there any kind of feedback to people who have maybe been with a Guild group prior to that? Is this something has changed to the positive? Is there anything which stands out where you would say, if you would go out to some business folks right now at Guild and say, what is it you experience as something positive or negative? With an agile process, what would be some things we would be hearing?
Flexibility, adaptability, the ability to pivot and change direction quickly without it feeling like a negative consequence. I think that there is just this general optimism that comes from working in this way, and it is a management by trust philosophy, that we trust everyone that we work with to make the right decisions for Gilt. And we do that by giving them autonomy and giving them the room to innovate and come up with ideas and to contribute to the corporate strategy. That has been huge for Guilt Tech.
Mhm.
I think that the engineers that have been here for this journey have definitely seen the benefits of, I'm not handing you a list of things you have to execute against that you had no input on. It is a discussion. We do this together, and you have as much input into this process as anyone.
Mhm.
And I think that just has tremendous value. If you're going to work at Guilt, you're a part of it. You're a part of the company. It's not just things that you're told to do every day. You are a part of making things happen.
So this is really awesome. We're really learning about an agile PMO. There's a lot of writing out there, a lot of critique. Should there be a PMO? Is there an existence of a PMO? Here is an example for a company is doing something right in a very good size, comparable company. I would say a large size company, 1,000 employees within PMO, where agile processes and ideas are being introduced and, as you said, ongoingly refined. So I want to thank you because we're somewhat reaching the end of our podcast here together. I want to thank you for spending 30 minutes with me. I think it was well spent. The only thing I regret is that we recorded this at 12 o'clock and I just missed a flash sale.
Yes. Missed the sales for today, but there's always going to be more tomorrow.
I want to thank you, and maybe we see each other at one of those Agile NYC events. Maybe you want to stop by at one of those conferences. Bring some of your colleagues from New York. We are in New York, and the 18th of September will be our next Agile Day.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Agile.FM, the radio for the Agile community. I'm your host, Joe Krebs. If you're interested in more programming and additional podcasts, please go to www.agile.fm. Talk to you soon.